Hi, hello. Fancy seeing you here because it's April 2022 and that means it is National Poetry Month. I do get quite a few questions. A lot of them are repetitive. So I decided to do a Q&A regarding my poetry books. They're right here. 3 out of the 4 that you see are ARCs. So that's why they have like that banner right there. I give out books fairly often to people that can't afford the books, but I don't give out ARCs like that. So that's why I have ARCs instead of a nice fancy cover like this one or that one. Anyway, I have my little mini cauldron with questions that I'm just gonna pick out of the cauldron because I think that's more fun than reading it off a screen or whatever. I don't remember how many questions there are, but I wrote all the ones down that are in my inbox, you know, on Facebook or Goodreads. And you can always send me questions on Goodreads. I don't really check the Facebook page all that much. First one, let's see. It says, number 8, why did you publish such personal poems? Well, the question that I had was, am I going to have all 4 poetry books just sitting on my computer for the rest of my life and no one sees them? Or I publish them and I help one person, 5 people, 100 people, it didn't matter. I help someone or someone's with my poetry. And in reference to the personal poems, this one, where am I going? This one, Teal Nostalgia, are what you would call full-length poems, as well as alpha beta poetry. Those 2 are full-length poems, but Teal Nostalgia is the one that has a lot of personal poems about trauma, mental illness, anti-religion, you know, that type of stuff. So that is the book that the question's referring to, and probably that person read Teal Nostalgia and was like, oh, that's a lot. But isn't poetry very personal? That's kind of what poetry is all about. I didn't really second guess myself or anything because that's what poetry is for, to write out your trauma or your happiness and share it with others so they can heal or relate to you. So I didn't really think that's a huge problem. And then, next up is number 5. What inspires you to write poetry? It was mental health issues, so I don't write poetry anymore. I wrote a lot of these during my college time. I was just having a lot of issues. Mentally, I'm fine now, but my therapist said you should probably, I mean, you're a writer, so I think you should try writing out what's going on in your mind, and it might help a little bit. And any little bit is good to let, you know, such traumatic events out, and then we can work on it a little bit more, because when you write things out, you're releasing, you know, small tidbits one at a time. And he was right. Of course he is. He has like 30 years of experience. So, and that's why it goes back to that other question. The personal poems are very personal, but I hope to help someone or many people out with, in particular, Teal Nostalgia. But also, there are some personal one-sentence poems that really are hitting in Paradise Found. So, it really just depends what you're looking for. Okay, number 7. How did you learn the ins and outs of writing poetry? I took a poetry 101 class in community college a long time ago, and that's how I learned how to write poetry. And even free verse poetry, which is just whatever you kind of want. But there is still techniques to making an impactful free verse poem. Next question is number 1. Are you going to publish any more poetry? Probably not, because I only write poems when I'm extremely depressed, and I haven't been extremely depressed for quite some time. So unless there's a really extreme event that pushes me down to that point again, which I really hope not, because it wasn't great, I'm probably not going to write poetry. The closest possibility is something, again, like Paradise Found, where it's one-liner or like one sentence poetry. That's not as bad for me, but like full-length poems, no, I really have to be in a bad mind space. That's how some people work with writing or with poetry. That's how I work with poetry specifically. Writing, I can do it whenever. Poetry, I can only write poems when I'm really depressed. That is so stereotypical, but it's true. In that case, I'm a little bit a stereotype of poets, but you know, life happens, right? Okay, next up, supposedly number 9. Has anyone ever been angry at you for any of your poems? Yes. Surprisingly, I get a lot of flack for textual love. I don't understand why, because the premise is it's one-liner, sometimes 2 lines of love poems. Even before we get into, you know, the introduction, it says the content warnings, which is sexually explicit at times. Not every single poem, but there are quite a few that are explicit. I put that right in the beginning, but I still get people like, oh, this is ungodly. I got that before. Ungodly. Ungodly. This happened on Wattpad, this happened on Twitter, that I don't have either of those, but now it's happening again where Christians flock to my books, and I don't understand why. I don't get it, because I'm an atheist. Like, I'm not writing Christian fiction whatsoever. But I guess because they think textual love, like Bible text love, I don't get it. But I did get ungodly situations from someone, and they rated it very low. That's so great. So textual love is 4 out of 5 stars on Amazon. It's fairly high on Goodreads, and usually that's reversed. Usually you get low ratings on Goodreads, because that's just how Goodreads works, and then you get great, you know, really usually fairly great ratings on Amazon, because people aren't really trolling you. Yeah, I got that in reverse, so that's fun to see. Everything else is high stars, but you can see a full star taken away from textual love, and I'm like, oh, these Christians. That's really what I'm saying, because I don't know what, it does not scream Christian fiction, but they seem to go for it. I also do get family friends or family members say that they read Teal Nostalgia and it was offensive. I'm like, yeah, there's definitely offensive poems in Teal Nostalgia. I thought that I would get more problems with Teal Nostalgia than textual love. I thought textual love wouldn't even get that many reads, honestly, but then again, it's romance. Anything romance is a pretty good sell, so that was my naivete, I guess you could say. But I don't recommend Teal Nostalgia to the majority of people I talk to. I just don't, because there's so much in Teal Nostalgia that could upset, even trigger, if you have PTSD, or piss off. So Teal Nostalgia is a recommendation for very few people. And so when it came out later last year, I said to many people, it's not for you, it's not for you, it's definitely not for you. But some of them still read it, and then they got upset, and I'm like, well, I told you. that it's not for you, so I don't feel any sympathy for you, because I told you, you're gonna get upset, you're going to get angry. I don't recommend this, and here's the other, you know, books that I have out that you could read. But, you know, free will and all, they can do what they want, but if someone gets upset because they read a book that I wrote when I told them not to, that's on you. Okay, next up, number 2. What's the most popular poetry book of yours? Oh yes, so it's actually, like I said previously, it's Textual Love. It's because it's romance, basically. Didn't think that that would, like, translate. I mean, romance and erotica, big, huge, ginormous book genres, right? I didn't think it would be, like, for poetry. However, I did set it up. It's 2 people in a relationship and they're long distance, and that's why they're texting, but it's in like a poetic prose, but it, like, 1 or 2 lines. So in the very beginning of the epilogue, I guess you could say it's an epilogue, I describe that, and then it's a story from beginning, middle, and end. So I could see how that is really intriguing to some people, especially people that are in long distance relationships, or they were and it didn't work out, and you feel a certain way about what happened. So I do kind of wish that Teal Nostalgia was just a little more popular, only because I want more people that need step towards the path of recovery and healing to read something that is helpful, right? Okay, next question, supposedly number 3. What poetry book has been the most controversial? Oh yeah, first up is Textual Love, like I said, and the second is Teal Nostalgia. And then I would go with Paradise Found, because there's some sexual content in there and some anti-religious poems as well. The least controversial and that I recommend to everyone is Alpha Beta Poetry, because yeah, there's nothing in there that could be construed as offensive. So basically, I recommend Alpha Beta Poetry to family, friends, and like even co-workers if they're really pushing for that, but I don't recommend the other ones. So. Okay, second to last, it's supposedly number 6. Who's your favorite poet? I don't have a favorite poet. I just read a lot of poetry books, and yeah, I don't really have a favorite author. No, that's a lie. I do have a favorite author, but it's not like I give her, Morgan Llewellyn, an Irish writer, 5 out of 5 stars every single time. There's quite a few books of hers, she's written so many, that are like 3 or 4 out of 5 stars, you know, on Goodreads. Okay, last question, it's supposedly number 4. How do you start a poem? With sangria? No, actually sometimes. How do I start a poem? I mean, of course I sit down and open a document, usually in Scrivener. Sometimes Word, but it's Scrivener. What I was doing when I was in college, just churning out these novels when I was, usually after a therapy session, is I had a therapy session, then I sat down, opened up the document, sat there for a good bit, sometimes with sangria, and I would play music. And I think it's funny, and I'm sure a lot of you will too, I got a lot of inspiration, not just from therapy, but combining it with any and all Lana Del Rey songs. I just needed a jump start, right? And I would just listen to like one of her songs randomly, and then here we go, you know? I don't have a schedule. I didn't have a plan whatsoever. I just wrote, usually after, like I said, therapy. But when I was also having a hard time in between, I would also write, and that it does alleviate mental anguish, and that's why I always recommend writing, like not even poetry, but if you want to go for it, poetry, but like a journal, or through fiction writing as well. Writing is very therapeutic, and even if you don't want to become a poet or a writer, I think it's really important to do that for yourself and for recovery and healing process. And it extremely helped me, and that's part of the reason why I don't want any of my poems to just sit on my computer for the rest of my life and go like possibly like an Emily Dickinds route. Why? When I can self-publish them and have people read them and say, you know, every once in a while that it really helped them want to escape for a little bit. And sometimes poetry is one of the few avenues where you can do that. And that's why April is National Poetry Month. So go out there and read some poetry books. Maybe read some of mine, or like at least one. I'm just saying. If you don't though, that's totally fine. Just read some poetry this April. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great reading and writing day. Bye!